on the 13th of June 2021 will mark the 41st death anniversary of Dr. Walter Rodney. His wife, Dr. Patricia Rodney, and children Shaka Rodney, Kanini Rodney Phillips, and Asha T. Rodney Esquire, have requested the assistance of His Excellency President Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali and the government of Guyana to formally honor the life, legacy, and contribution of Dr. Rodney to Guyana, and to finally set the public record straight in relation to certain matters surrounding his tragic death. Today, the privilege is mine to announce that His Excellency the President and the government of Guyana have acceded to this request as part of the historic step of bringing a level of closure to the Rodney family with respect to the death of Dr. Walter Rodney. This is a momentous occasion for many reasons, and it is also a personal privilege for me, and indeed all of us, to be part of a process to right this tragic wrong and to begin the process of the rectification of the historic record. Walter Anthony Rodney was only 38 years old and a leader of the Working People's Alliance when he was killed in a bomb blast on June 13, 1980. As per the Fobbs-Burnham PNC government, Rodney intended to blow up the Georgetown prisons, but the bomb was accidentally detonated. The Rodney family and Donald Rodney, Walter Rodney's brother, who was in the car at the time with Walter when the bomb exploded, have vehemently and consistently opposed this narrative for 41 long years. The news of Dr. Rodney's tragic death sent shock tremors to the conscience of Guyanese, West Indians, Americans, Europeans, Africans, and indeed the world over. To say that Dr. Rodney's death and the ensuing events in relation thereto were a horrendous miscarriage of justice would be an appalling understatement. The self-evident truth is that when wrongs of such magnitude occur, they can never really be righted. The least can be done in this instance is to attempt to grant the wishes of the loved ones of Dr. Rodney and to work with them in bringing these wishes to fruition as they attempt to forge their own closure in relation to this horrific tragedy. On the 8th day of February 2014, a commission of inquiry was appointed by President Donald Ramotar to inquire into and to report on the circumstances surrounding the death of Dr. Rodney. On the 8th day of February 2014, a commission of inquiry was appointed by President Donald Ramotar to inquire into and report on the circumstances surrounding the death of Dr. Rodney. The report of that commission of inquiry was tabled under this House under the APNU-AFC government in 2016. A motion was tabled in this House shortly thereafter by the Honourable Gail Teixeira, then opposition member of Parliament of the People's Progressive Party Civic, calling upon the government to implement the recommendations of that report. The motion was voted down by the then government. This government hereby commits to move another motion in this House shortly, seeking the approval of that report by this House and a resolution that the recommendations contained therein be approved. An inquest was conducted 8 years after Dr. Rodney's death.
Speaker.
and the findings were that Dr. Rodney died by misadventure. This government hereby commits to move another motion in this House shortly, seeking the approval of that report by this House and a resolution that the recommendations contained therein be approved. An inquest was conducted 8 years after Dr. Rodney's death, and the findings were that Dr. Rodney died by misadventure. This inquest was reviewed by the 2014 Commission of Inquiry and found to be incredible, flawed, and dubious. Steps will be taken to invalidate or set aside the perverse findings of that inquest. Although this son of Guyana was best known and respected throughout the world for his academic accomplishments, scholarship, and activism, his death certificate described him as unemployed, as he was denied a job at his country's only university after working at universities across the globe. This historical wrong will be corrected, and the death certificate will be amended to read professor instead of unemployed. We have already begun and will continue our efforts to secure the records of the 2014 Commission of Inquiry. Those records will be digitized by our National Archives, recently renamed the Walter Rodney National Archives, in collaboration with the Walter Rodney Foundation and the Atlanta University Center Robert W. Woodruff Library, Atlanta, Georgia, and copies of the same will be housed at that institution as part of the Walter Rodney Papers and Special Collection. The Rodney gravesite and memorial are currently being managed collaboratively between the Rodney family and the National Trust. Today, I am proud to announce that they will be declared national monuments and fall under the administration of the National Trust. One of the greatest tragedies flowing from Dr. Rodney's death is the loss of his scholarship to the people of Guyana. His children's books that celebrate the cultural heritage of Guyanese, Kofi Badu out of Africa, and Lakshmi out of India, shall be placed on the national syllabus by the Ministry of Education and in the hands of primary and secondary students across this land. Additionally, his other major works, including a history of the Guyanese working people, Guyanese sugar plantations in the late 19th century, and how Europe underdeveloped Africa, shall be made available to the Library of the University of Guyana. The Walter Rodney Chair at the University of Guyana will be re-established. It is common knowledge that Donald Rodney was in the car with Dr. Walter Rodney on that fateful evening and is also a victim of this tragedy. This included a perverse conviction by a magistrate court, the burden of which Donald Rodney carried for the past 41 years. Fortuitously, only recently the Court of Appeal of Guyana set aside that conviction. Every effort will be made to remove and expunge all public record that intimate any level of guilt or wrongdoing by Dr. Walter Rodney in relation to June 13, 1980 tragedy. For too long, Dr. Walter Rodney's death has been the subject of an irreverent misdescription. It was not a misadventure, it was an assassination, a great stain on our republic. This sadistic misrepresentation on Dr. Rodney's death certificate prevented his family from recovering not a blind cent from his insurance policy, the only financial provision he made for his family, his wife, and 3 infant children. This desecration must end now. His death certificate will be amended to delete the word misadventure as the cause of death and substitute, therefore, the word assassination. In this regard, it is opposite that I refer to the findings of the commissioners in their report in the 2014 Commission of Inquiry. They state, and I quote, "We have no hesitation in holding that Gregory Smith was responsible for Dr. Walter Rodney's death on the 13th of June 1980. And in so doing, he was acting as an agent of the state, having aided and abetted so to do by individuals holding positions of leadership in state agencies and committed to carry out the wishes of the PNC administration. Unquote. One of the key findings was stark. I quote, Dr. Walter Rodney was a man of large and significant stature, both in Guyana and beyond. And at the time of his death, he could only have been killed in what we find to be a state-organized assassination with the knowledge of Prime Minister Barnum in the Guyana of that period. Unquote. In all democratic societies, there are fundamental laws by which the civil rights of citizens are acknowledged, recognized, and protected. Our Constitution, as it did in 1980, sets out these fundamental rights and freedoms and protections. They include the right to life and provisions to secure the protection of the law. Dr. Rodney was denied these basic, inalienable, but fundamental human rights. Expectedly, Dr. Rodney's death has had a lifelong and lasting impact on the Rodney family, Donald Rodney, and indeed on Guyana. As such, the government of Guyana adopt these measures as simply the right thing to do. As Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, and on behalf of His Excellency, President Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, and indeed the government of Guyana, I join with the people of Guyana in expressing sorrow to his widow, Dr. Patricia Rodney, and 3 children, Shaka Rodney, Kanini Rodney Phillips, medical doctor, and Asha T. Rodney, attorney at law, and also to his brother Donald Rodney. I have personally spoken with them to convey the government's position on this matter. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.